Which functional food and beverage trends do I predict will be the biggest in 2021? So this is actually the third annual list that I've put together. This year-end series of videos that either predict the future over the next year or kind of recap some of the things that happened over the last year tend to be my most popular pieces of content. And if you wanted to see my record in terms of getting some of these predictions correct over the last 2 years, what you'll need to do is pop over to my Instagram. It's just my name, Joshua_Schall, where I just made a recent post that did recap the my top 5 biggest predictions for the 2019 year and also the 2020 year. And the one thing that I do, I guess, a little bit differently in terms of some of these trend prediction pieces of content is that I do not allow myself to carry over any of the existing predictions that I've had over the several years. I'm not exactly sure like how many years before I'll allow maybe that to come back up if maybe I was a little bit too early on something. But this is kind of counter to the definition of a trend because a lot of the things that I talked about over the last 2 years are still happening and maybe even in much more frequency than the year in which I predicted it. But this is what makes it challenging. This is what makes it fun. So let's jump into my top 5 functional food and beverage trends that I think are going to be the biggest in 2021. The first one is going to be around the burnout syndrome. And some of the underlying drivers in which I think this is going to be a big trend is because current year's pandemic, both from a health perspective and an economic perspective, and just a lot of the stresses and things that was created from that. It seems like that is the tipping point for a lot of people to realize that, this just was just enough. We have to make some changes. There's some things going on from a mental health perspective that we need to address, and mental well-being will be something that a lot of people focus on in the future. And talking about what this could potentially look like in the future, that feeling of like being on a hamster wheel of competition is not going away in America. But the good news is, though, the kind of vulnerable state that you're in when you're talking about mental health struggles or just mental well-being, that's becoming a lot more humanized. And seeking to prioritize mental health is becoming more normalized. So I believe this creates a huge opportunity for food and beverage solutions. I think there will be some diet-based solutions and messaging that does focus on supporting mental health, different nutraceutical, herbal ingredients, vitamins, minerals, adaptogens. You're going to see a lot more of those being included in food and beverages this year, and also a lot of the communication and marketing around those ingredients, like the reason why those are in the products, will definitely have a lot more of the spotlight shown on them. And I expect some ambitious companies to kind of tie in a whole big ecosystem with integrated solutions that surround technology, maybe some things around wearables, applications, telemedicine. You're also going to see those food and beverage products be integrated with supplements, nutritional supplements, also over-the-counter type medications or generic medications that are readily available for anybody that could get a prescription but has maybe some stigma around it, that companies are attacking and addressing those markets in a digital way and kind of creating a better customer experience around, and also attaching that all to non-consumable consumer products to really kind of create an integrated solution that's going to solve the burnout syndrome. The second trend that I wanted to talk about around functional food and beverage in 2021 is around how kids aren't off limits anymore. The main underlying driver here is that virtual schooling and kids being at home with restricted living situations extending into 2021 for probably most of the year will create a larger need for parents to start addressing food and beverage choices at home for their children that relate to maybe some of the changes they're also going to be making in their own diet. And what this could potentially look like in the future is that we have to consider that this was once kind of an unwritten rule in the functional food and beverage market, that kids were generally not necessarily like targeted or marketed, and the brands that did generally were kind of the highest caliber, maybe over-the-counter medications, owned by pharmaceutical companies, but that's kind of being stripped away. And a lot of like the better for you trends that are happening and getting into a lot of what children are eating and drinking today will now shift from better for you conventional products over to some type of functional benefits. You're going to see a lot more packaging call outs. You're going to be seeing a lot more ingredients added to foods and beverages that a lot of children are consuming and used to be consuming. So you think about like, different snacking items like fruit snacks or something around yogurts. You're going to see a lot of those products have a lot more like immunity or immune boosting type of ingredients being added to them. I think you're going to see a lot more plant-based proteins being somehow integrated into food and beverage offerings for children. And I wouldn't be surprised if food brands that are focused on younger demographics, younger age children, to start looking towards the toy industry in terms of what they're doing with influencer marketing. The third functional food and beverage trend that I predict will be huge in 2021 is that mushrooms will have a magic year. Underlying drivers of this trend here is it seems in all consumer categories that what was once old is new again. And if you think about mushrooms and just kind of their wellness properties, they have been touted throughout history. Think about mushroom usage today, it can be attached to like a ton of different consumer trends. You think about stress reduction, you think about brain health, you think about plant-based diets and immune support. All of those things, different mushrooms can be utilized within products that are positioned within any of those large trends that you're seeing within food and beverage. Now, if you add on top of that psychedelic mushrooms have been legalized in a few cities and decriminalized in a few more, it just kind of all comes together. And you think about mushrooms, the most basic to the most advanced mushrooms will probably be at a utilization within food and beverage at an all-time high. Now, what could happen in the future here, if you listen to some other like forward-leaning thought leaders in functional food and beverage, they might already say like mushrooms have been out there and they've already had their year and this is past this. But why I'm naming it this year is because though it has been around in the nutritional supplement section, that's kind of where you're seeing a lot of the growth at right now. The food and beverage space is extremely fragmented. There's not many very large brands and not many that are what we would consider like, somewhere between bleeding edge and mainstream. There hasn't been a lot of those brands. So I still think there is a ton of runway left with mushroom. You're going to see this in most new food and beverage applications that, kind of become hip and trendy over 2021. So mushroom powders being added to nutritional bars, drink mixes. It's going to be infused in different coffee mixes or coffee additives. I think you're going to see them added into animal-based meats or animal-based dairy products and have marketing call-outs for the functional benefit they're looking to add into those products. So what I talked about, I think last year was some of the blended animal and plant-based meats. I think mushrooms is kind of a continuation of that, but also being used as a call-out. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of the kind of larger active nutrition brands that are very focused on mushroom-based products will get acquired by a large strategic this year or maybe private equity firm. The brand that I'm mostly looking at here would be Four Sigmatic. The fourth functional food and beverage trend prediction that I think is going to be huge in 2021 is that niche plant-based proteins peek out of the shadows. The underlying driver here is mostly around that the public has this unrelenting desire to always add protein into their diet. You also kind of throw in a lot of what's happening with the plant-based movement, flexitarianism, and I think you're going to have a breakout year for niche kind of plant-based proteins that are beyond the typical pea, brown rice or soy proteins. And what this could potentially kind of look like in the future is like really wild. And I'll kind of get into some of like the technological things that really could drive some of these like niche plant-based proteins or just like plants being utilized in much different ways. And a lot of that kind of comes down to the growing trialing and adoption of brands like Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, and a number of other startups that are addressing plant-based products in a much different way. Now, there always seems to be like this hot ingredient. Maybe this year is chickpeas. I know a lot of people have been talking about chickpeas over the last maybe 1 or 2 years. So I think you're going to be seeing that and a lot more being added into it from a protein perspective and a lot more like mainstream food and beverage products. But I think overall, if we're looking at plant-based proteins, maybe the easiest ones to extract would be something around legumes. So you might be seeing a lot more utilization of some different pea varieties, lentils, nuts, millets. And I say that because I think a lot of those crops in general are regenerative in nature. And I think that goes along with a lot of the trends that are happening with sustainability and feeds into like this bigger like value-based eating decision-making around CPG products. But beyond mainstream, when I was talking about some of those like technological advancements in utilization of like artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms, and a few startups using those for product development to learn infinite combinations of plants and plant parts to recreate animal-based products that we know and love. So you already see some of those things with meat. That is the easiest, or I guess the biggest market to address if you can get somebody to change over consumption into something that is similar. That was kind of the first step, but now you're going to start seeing this in almost all animal-based products. And I think a lot of these plants, plant proteins, plant parts will be a big part of that. The last functional food and beverage trend that I'm predicting will be huge in 2021 is actually a layup. And I think at this point, I'm okay with taking a layup. And this is with immunity for everyone. And underlying driver is that a lot of the functional food and beverage trends really look and draw upon inspiration from nutritional supplement space. And if anybody pays any attention to the nutritional supplement space, immunity and immune health products were huge this year. And I think that you're going to see a lot of that transition into food and beverage offerings. But the biggest kind of change agent is really the media and them really putting a lot of attention on the COVID-19 pandemic, really kind of broadcasting a lot of the negative aspects of that. And the only thing that a consumer could look at that and say, I need to start looking at preventative things. And I think that's brought a lot of attention towards ways that you can become more healthier and boost your immune system. What could kind of happen in the future? I think very much in the short term, you're going to see a lot of existing products in the food and beverage space that weren't really considered all that functional. We'll start to have a lot more call outs around ingredients that were already in there and have a lot more spotlight towards what those do to maybe immune boosting or immune support. I think after you see some of the existing food and beverages really change their packaging and make a lot more call outs towards immune support, I think then you're going to start to see some line extensions from existing kind of better for you or functional food and beverage brands. That seems like a pretty logical thing for a lot of these brands to do. I think a lot more products are going to have added herbal ingredients, things that really kind of caught fire over the last year in the supplement market. You have like elderberry or echinacea, things like turmeric or ginger. But if we take this a step further, I think you're going to start to see maybe thought leaders or brands that have authority to speak on this matter talk about immune rejuvenation, or like the ability to train for immunity. And this is going to include a lot of typical healthy living practices, but it will likely be a lot more stickier for people to adopt some of these lifestyle changes because of a lot of the fear that's still from COVID-19. And I think you're going to start to see some more solutions kind of get added to this, be that at-home testing, maybe some wearables, somehow finding some different variables to track to see how things are going in that area, and know if a lot of these products that they're taking are actually doing what they are intended to do. Now, what did you guys think of my list? Did you guys have different ones on yours? I'd be interested to hear about anything supporting some of the ones that I talked about, or just alerting me of ones that maybe I did not name on my top 5 list this year. But make sure you are dropping a comment on the YouTube video or following me on any of my social media platforms where I'm active on pretty much all of them. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly. And if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you some value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.